A very good evening and welcome to another edition of The Hot Seat. We join you amid a very trying time for our country here. The political crisis that has taken over our country is quite serious, and because of that, we've got a very distinguished guest on our show who is quite familiar with the situation in our country, Mr. Russaripala. Very good evening, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on The Hot Seat.
Good evening. I'm happy to join you.
So let's get right into it, since we seem to have no time to waste. The current political crisis in our country. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's have a very analytical scenario looking to what happened. So on the 26th of November, the new government was appointed. I would like to ask you, what is your view on the appointment of the new government?
I think from picking up from what the president announced after the incident, we see that he had come to an inevitable sort of a point of no return like place in the conducting of affairs of the government, because he could not hold on any further without giving effect to certain changes in the government. That is what has happened. So what he did was, constitutionally, he had the right to appoint a prime minister, and that arose from another very important thing that all of us seem to forget. That is, the UPFA, which was the only other constituent party in the national government then, they suddenly decided to withdraw from the national government. The withdrawal of the UPFA from the national government ipso facto automatically follows that the national government, so-called national government, cannot continue as it is according to the constitutional provisions. The constitution very clearly provides for a national government when there is the party that holds the majority seats in the parliament forms a coalition with another party to form a national government. When the other party withdraws, the national government is not there. When the national government is not there, the number of members in the cabinet has to automatically come down to 30, which means the sitting cabinet gets dissolved automatically. When the cabinet goes off, immediately thereafter, the positions of the prime minister also goes off, ceases. So therefore, what followed thereafter is the natural consequences of those effects of the constitutional provisions, that firstly the national government fell, secondly the cabinet ceased to exist, and as a result of which the prime minister ceased to exist. So the president had to take the necessary action to appoint a prime minister, appoint a cabinet, then take the other necessary actions in keeping with that decision.
Definitely. We will be back for more discussions on the political crisis that has grappled Sri Lanka. Stay tuned. You're watching The Hot Seat. Welcome back. You're watching The Hot Seat. We're in conversation with Mr. Russaripala. Mr. Tennako, now I think it's quite evident from the explanation that you gave on the first half of this segment that the appointment of the new government, the new cabinet, is legal, because that has not been challenged in a court of law. And according to the Gazette issued by the President, naming Mahinda Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister and the rest of the ministers, nobody has challenged this. So for the time being, the appointment of this government is legal. I would like to ask you a question. Why hasn't the international community accepted this government, and why hasn't former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe still not left Temple Trees?
Yeah, this is the most intriguing part of this entire episode, because seeing who Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe was, now this is not the first time that he is experiencing a shortening of his term.
A premature exit from
premature
position of Prime Minister.
Exit for him.
From the same position.
As the Prime Minister.
Yes.
Now in 2005 we saw, when Chandrika Kumaratunga was the President, and when he had a majority in the Parliament, his party, he was removed. He was removed. There were a large number of people who congregated and shouted at slogans and said, "Don't leave," and then stand and fight. But what did Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe do? He came to Temple Trees, he packed up his suitcase and went home. And that was Ranil Wickremesinghe we have seen. But today, we see he is a different person. The only presumption that we can come to is that he is not acting on his own in this instance. There is some unseen force that is keeping him or holding on to him that he should not leave. And what that unseen force and why he is leading his party to this anarchy situation in this country, to give a lead to this anarchy situation, creation of this anarchy situation in this country, is very difficult to understand why he is doing this. I mean, that is where we begin to suspect and think that there is something more, what we don't see, that is holding him up. And we will very soon uncover what that is, because the reaction of a few selected Western countries, from that we can see that they all have some vested interest in retaining Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe's continuation as the Prime Minister. So there, when we see what those countries are and what their connections are internationally into various other organizations which we suspect which is trying to bring about a new economic order to the global scenario, I think there's room to suspect that there is a foreign force behind this.
So, Mr. Tennecoon, that was your take on the effect that the international community has had on the current political crisis in the country. But I believe it's safe to say that within the past 70 or so years, since the time that Sri Lanka gained independence, we are currently in the worst state that we were in. And this was brought about by both political parties, bad decisions on both political parties. There might have been some good men along the way. However, we have talk about a general election coming up. Do you see this general election as a chance for the Sri Lankan general public towards redemption?
I'm afraid, because if it was a normal general election that we were getting ready for, there were chances for the polarization of forces to get rid of, these unwanted elements that we are very critical about. But unfortunately, in the given situation, what we are going to experience looks like, very likely, if the parliament is suddenly dissolved and if you are going in for election suddenly, under what system of elections are we going for elections is
proportional
number one,
representation.
Proportional representation. Secondly, by the domination of the same parties and the same people, we are going to pick and choose people. So will there be time sufficient for independent organizations or social groups to rally around and polarize to form a formidable force to make a sort of a comeback or sort of make some representation? I don't think. That is the most unfortunate thing that we had. But if normally the elections were held in the normal way, there was a growing situation in the country where people, various social groups, intellectuals and others, they were very sincere about bringing about a change. And that was happening. And unfortunately, this happened in between. And now I think we'll have to reconcile to the fact that we are again going to have a continuation of what we have been experiencing for some time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rusulipala Tennecoon. We will be back for more on the political crisis on Sri Lanka. Do stay tuned. You're watching The Hot Seat. Welcome back. You're watching The Hot Seat. We're in conversation with Mr. Rusulipala Tennecoon. Mr. Tennecoon, you were saying that with the elections coming so suddenly, you don't see that social groups can polarize and face this election against this, against the things that we stand against. Now, it's quite clear that there is a consensus among the general public that the 225 members in Parliament currently are not suitable to be there, minus, of course, a few good people who are just thrown into that bunch, because the majority of them are, of course, not suitable of being there. So are you saying that the general public of Sri Lanka has no chance for redemption in this election? Is there any silver lining to this dark and grim cloud?
Very, very little and very grim chances, but only hope is that if the parties do decide to drop some of these people who are openly criticized and people who have expressed their views against them, who are having charges against them, who are facing court cases, and all those people, if they are eliminated, at least to some extent.
We had some controversial appointments recently, as the past few days, including Nalaka Godaheva, who has allegations of serious financial fraud against him. And he has been appointed as the chairman of Sri Lanka Insurance.
Because I saw the
News report.
Media critical, being very critical about it, and it's fair. You know, the criticism that is leveled is very fair, because in the context of what we saw in the very recent past, and when there are things pending and unconcluded in that form, they could have had a little second thoughts about making these appointments. I mean, this gives a bit of a bad color again into the whole affair, and they start suspecting, well, are we going back into the same era, or are we going to have a repetition of what we saw? So this is what is bad about it. I wish that it did not happen, you know. Not that I have anything personally against these gentlemen, but then when there is something pending, and when a prima facie has been established and cases are going on, I mean, it's there is enough and sufficient grounds for them to say, well, I will stay back until these things are cleared. That's how things should be done.
You said the only hope that the general public has is if these political parties put forward people who actually do care about the country. But looking back at precedent, in 2015, when the government came into power, they came on a bandwagon of good governance, but then that seemed to have just disappeared into the clouds. And then again, this government, when it came in, they said we will do away with corruption. This government was corrupt. They were having deals with other countries. Seems they have started their tricks again. So do you believe that the general public, or at least us in this conversation, can we give these political parties the benefit of the doubt that they will field potential proper candidates for the upcoming general election, if there is one, of course?
When you look back the 2015 situation, you see, although we were talking about good governance, we came to the same governance, no?
Exactly.
The same people were in the parliament.
Same people.
Only the president was changed. And the president was, I think, a lost candidate, because in that state of affairs, he couldn't do much because he was dealing with the same parliamentarians and the same group of people. Only thing is that instead of the ruling party, another party with a minority backing in the number of seats, they were given the chance to run the government.
Exactly.
That is the only thing that we experienced. And what people forget is that at that particular moment, there was no change of government really.
There was only a change of the president.
Only the change of the president.
And at the rate that parliamentarians keep on switching parties, I'm pretty sure they would have supported all the parties who are there in parliament at some point of their life. So it's quite hard to see any change.
Any party, any time is their motto.
Any party, any time.
Yes.
So, Mr. Rusiripala, if you have an opportunity to give a final few words of advice to the general public, what would they be?
I think we all must look at this impasse that we are facing today in a different way. This is a created situation that we are unfortunately experiencing. If Mr. Wickremesinghe decided to quit and face the consequences, not general election, I mean
The change
of
in
course,
the government.
change of government, and then having gone to the parliament, allowing the parliament to have its normal course of, follow the normal procedures. And if he presented his opposition or he showed his strength or whatever, that could have eased many things and taken away all these unwanted interferences with the foreign powers and so on. What is happening today is totally due to the manner in which the UNP reacted to the action that was taken by the president. If that did not happen, if they were little more patient to allow the parliament to meet, to go there, table a no confidence motion in the proper way, show their strength, and then come back, I mean, things would have, it's a matter of, it would have been maximum 2 weeks. You would have resolved everything. No foreign interference, nothing, no bad image about the country. Nobody will talk bad against our democratic practices. But instead of that, when people started talking about bloodshed and trouble and revolution in parliament, this is where we are. It's very unfortunate. This should not have happened. And Mr. Wickremesinghe, a person like Mr. Wickremesinghe, should not have given leadership to a situation like that. That is where we suspect it is a force unseen behind that is making him to do this.
And also, of course, the clashes that erupted in Parliament further aggravated the situation. We saw people bringing knives into Parliament. We saw chili powder being thrown by certain MPs. And the very MP who did throw chili powder, when he came out, his explanation was that the chili powder fell from the gallery on top of him and he threw it off somewhere else. But then clearly, it's funny to see these politicians lie when they are caught on camera.
They act like school children. But anyway, partly in entirety, the responsibility for the state of affairs that is continuing in the parliament should fall upon the speaker. Because if the speaker acted instead of, see the first instance, a piece of paper was handed over to the speaker, said to contain a no confidence motion. He read it and he asked for a vote. Wasn't that the start of all these things? And this speaker, when
a deviation from due process.
Completely, and deviation from his own conviction and statement. The previous day or 2 days before, he said, well, I will accommodate the new Prime Minister, seats have been made, we'll go on. And then he comes to Parliament, that piece of paper is handed over to him, the so-called no confidence motion. He tries to take a vote on it. Then he says, well, from today I am not accepting this government. No Prime Minister, no government. I mean, this is a
joke.
This is more than a joke. I think he has to take the complete responsibility for this state of affairs. It is a provocation in the first place, and it is some kind of obstinacy that he should not have resorted to in that capacity as the speaker, which is a very supreme position in the democracy of this country. He should not have resorted to that. Instead, he could have balanced the thing entirely to the advantage of even Mr. Wickremesinghe if he did not behave it this way. And today it's it has taken a different turn.
Exactly.
So therefore, I think we all watch these things very carefully. When we observe and when we see the beginning of the provocations, we see what he has contributed to this confusion is not second to any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rusiri Palathendakoon, for joining us this evening on the hot seat. Of course, this massive political instability in the country cannot be discussed in mere 30 minutes.
No.
But thank you very much for your input and for your understanding on the subject. Thank you very much, Mr. Rusiri Palathendakoon, and thank you very much to our viewers out there for tuning in. Do join us next week with the hot seat.